Okay, we'll call to order the Monday, November 6, 2023 meeting of the Community Preservation Committee. We have a small group tonight, but it is still technically quorum. So we'll go right into the agenda. The first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at them? Are there in order? Are there any questions or corrections?
No.
That is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October meeting?
Move to approve?
A second?
Second.
All in favor of reviewing the minute, of approving the minutes from October 2023?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes are approved. Review and sign bills. Chris, we do not currently have any bills, do we?
No bills for tonight.
Then we will move on. The next is, Chris, could you give us an update on the RFQ for the CPC support retainer?
Yeah, so the RFQ, I have not had a chance to work on refining that further. I know we had kind of deliberated on a little bit and touched on how the assistant planner position may also kind of feed into that, not in terms of the administrative budget, but just in terms of office capacity and support. So we certainly can continue to review that. I think, the main question as we get back up to full capacity in our office is looking at, do we have, a consultant in the office that we have some kind of a support through that, as many of those job descriptions indicate, versus additional consultant support similar to the role of the coalition, but on a more as-needed basis. So I think that's kind of the question that still remains. In terms of the assistant planner interview, we're down to 3 candidates. We've completed second round interviews for 2 of those 3 candidates. All of them are really exceptional at this point, the ones that made it to the second round. I think any of them would be wonderful for the position. So we have a kind of a tough decision after we have our last second round interview of choosing from that pool. Both of the second round interviews were very strong. I actually finished one up this afternoon. And so I think we're in pretty good shape, hopefully, to fill that position in the next coming weeks. So hopefully having an announcement at our December meeting for that.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Chris on the, yes?
I'm very excited to have that position filled, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm thinking you
that'd be
should-
Us
great.
as well.
Hire all 3, just to be on the safe side. Yeah, get all 3 on board.
Excellent. And if there's no more discussion on that, we're going to get an update on historic home restoration programs. Do you have anything on that?
Well, I do. I did have a conversation with the program administrator. I'm happy to go over what we talked about, or since it's not a time-sensitive issue, if we want to wait till the whole committee is here to go over it, I can do that as well. It's up to the,
What do you all
I mean, there's no big rush on this. It's not something we're going to do next week, but it's up to you. If you have
Would you
questions, I'm
folks
happy
like
to
to hear
answer.
more, or would you like to wait? I mean, we do run the risk of wanting to repeat some of it next time.
Well, it's just, it doesn't matter. It's up to you. If you want to hear it now, I'll tell you what I learned, and we can repeat it again.
More.
Okay, well, I'll give you a quick rundown. One of the questions that you had was who administers the program. And interestingly, the planning department came to the CPC in Springfield with this proposal and thought it was a good idea based on the fact that it was a benefit to the public, and it helped with the historic preservation and curtailed some blight that was going on. So after reviewing it, the CPC decided that it was a program that they would be interested in promoting, but they did not want to administer it. All right, so although they do administer it, they hired a full-time for that position, administrator, which happens to be the chair of the CPC. So she's hired outside of the role of CPC. So there's no volunteer work on this. It's all hired. So they do have that position filled. And she said it's very labor-intensive, so it's not something that would be easily done by just this committee. It really does require full-time administration of it. The funding comes from the undesignated reserves and from the historical resource reserves, and they've allocated a total of $250,000 out of their funding, and that usually funds 8 to 10 projects. They get at least 200 applicants. So there's obviously of course, they've extended their time frame of what would qualify into what was it, 1930s, I think, or 1940s. So it's a broader base of properties than we would be looking at. But there obviously is a demand. It's a random lottery system. They fill out the preliminary applications, and she looks at them and to make sure that they're qualify under their guidelines. And then they go into a lottery. Those go into a lottery pool. And if they're picked, then they go through the next process of application, just to make sure. Another question you had was regarding who determines whether the project is viable or are we putting good money into, to waste. They hire a preservation planner that's hired. She says it runs for the year, it usually runs under $10,000. It's about $100 an hour for this planner that comes in and analyzes, does an assessment of the property to see what needs to be done, whether it can be, whether the guidelines of the Secretary of the Interior can be followed. So it's a pretty intensive process. She says when they get there, they look at it, it's either yes or no. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing, so it's not a big issue. It's not anybody that on the committee that has to have that responsibility. And the homeowner receives a direct grant, and they get 3 bids. I think it was 3 bids, and then they have to present those, and then they get reimbursed for the work that's done. So an invoice is sent to the applicant, and then they pay the contractor. So it doesn't go through any. The town isn't paying the work of the contractor. The applicant is paying the contractor, and then the inspection is made with each disbursement of funds. But the way I look at it is that, we're not nearly ready for this type of a program yet. I think there has to be some other preservation things in place at the town so that something like this would work. I know we talked about the other grant money that might be available, the certified local government programs. And if you look at that, qualifications for that, from my viewpoint, we only, out of 5 qualifications, we've only matched 2 of them. So we have a ways to go before we could even qualify for that. So I think the town has to make the commitment for historic preservation first, have a plan in place, and then something like this can be instituted very much more easily. It's kind of putting the cart before the horse right now, but I think it's something that we can look towards for the future, and could be definitely viable if we have some other plans in place and the town has a commitment to preserve historic resources. So for right now, it's not a dead horse. It's just that more work has to be done to be able to institute it. So that's how I view it, but I don't know how the rest of you feel. You probably have your own ideas about it. I mean, it'd be wonderful. I was driving through town today, and I saw at least a half a dozen homes that I thought, boy, this needs they need some work. There was work to be done, and they're visible. It's not like they're tucked in. They're on the main drags: South Street, Maple Ave, Main Street. So, It depends on what the town wants their town to look like, you know? Don't we have an ordinance in town about cutting grass? You know, if your grass gets too high, you have, the town, so it's like, okay, you know, they'll come and cut it if you can't cut it yourself, I guess. But, you know, it doesn't mean we have to go repair everybody's houses, but, you know, historic homes, it's a resource that towns should be proud of, so just something to look for in the future. Thanks for your willingness to listen.
Thank you for all the research that you did.
Well, there's more. She was very, very helpful. And she was willing to come to a meeting anytime if we wanted her to come in and talk about it, so we can keep that in mind.
That sounds like a great program to keep in the back of our mind, or when we think ahead and plan ahead, something to work
Right.
towards.
I mean, CPA is young in this town yet, too, so, you know, once we bank some money and we have the things going, that's a little easier, but these are things to look for in the future. We're young.
Anyone else have questions, comments, thoughts
Yeah,
on it?
I guess, again, being new to the committee, I don't necessarily understand, I guess, the program. From a historic home standpoint, I know a while back they were talking about, they wanted to get something passed at the town meeting that never really got there, was the 100-year-old house or something like that. But even beyond that, I think,
Oh, a demolition bylaw? The
no,
demolition bylaw?
That sounds like
even before the demolition bylaw, that once the house was 100 years old, that the Historic Commission would get to review any sale that was over 100 years old, or something like that. That goes back 6, 7 years. But be that as it may.
Okay, I don't remember that.
I guess, in terms of dispersing these funds, so literally, if somebody showed up tomorrow with a 200-year-old house and said, I want to do some, came to us and said, I want to do some, here are the renovations I want to do, would that be something we would be considering? I guess in terms of how it would work?
Not as CPA currently works. If we adopted a program like that down the road, what Gail has brought to us, certainly you could explain better, is there's a process. So the building, the home would have to be considered historic by the Historical Commission, and ultimately those that are eligible, there's a lottery. It's random who gets it, which keeps
Well, that,
opinions and politics. Once they're eligible, it's randomly decided who gets the funding in a given year. But that
well,
would be,
it would be randomly decided if we had enough people apply.
Correct. I don't think there would be, well, I can't say how many would apply. I mean, Springfield is a city,
Yeah.
much larger than Shrewsbury, so they have 200 to 225 applicants regularly, so, in their pool.
So I guess that's kind of my question. If somebody were to apply in the next month or two,
Yeah, we could not do that.
we can't do anything?
No,
no, we
not with
can't.
CPA funds.
Right now, the way CPA, without adopting such a program, we don't have a vehicle for rehabbing a private home.
Well,
I guess that's what I was getting at.
yeah,
The CPA would have to adopt this program? Who would adopt, the town has, who would have to adopt the program?
it's a bylaw, if I'm correct. It would be a bylaw in the town, and then CPC would have to agree to administer it, oversee it. But there are some ways to get around the private ownership, but
It would be exceedingly difficult
it'd be difficult for a
a private
homeowner.
home to prove a public good at this point, the way CPC is currently administered. And the projects that we recommend to go forward need to show a public good to the community, not just that my real house needs a new porch and it looks great and my neighbors like it. It needs to be greater than that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe CPA funds can be used for private entities now, like churches, YMCA and stuff. There's a way to get around that. But I don't know that there's homeowners that, other than these programs, that have been able to utilize CPA funding.
Now, something like, if the Artemis Ward House was privately owned, I would think that that would be the kind of house that would potentially qualify, because a person of historic interest lived there. There's a lot of history in that place. There's a lot of stuff still in there that dates way back. So, and
Well, it's a
It
strong.
is
if they
privately
let
owned
people
by
in,
Harvard
and they do let people
University.
in, so, yeah.
They don't need our money.
No, they ought to be
The other
paying
way
us.
around.
You know if they pay anything in lieu of taxes or anything?
That I'm not sure.
Really be nice if they did.
Or opened it up to the.
Well, you know, anytime you're using public funds for private purposes, it gets a little tricky. So we have to be real clear as to the purpose and why we're doing it, you know, and that's what we have to work out. Right now, I don't think it's completely clear that this is a good program for us or not, but that's what we have to work towards with a plan. And if we don't have a preservation plan in town, it's hard to work towards those types of goals. So I think that's the first step.
Jason, you're our CPA scholar, so what have you got on the subject?
Yes, so I would say, I think Gail, you brought up churches. I just wanted for our
Yes, please.
live audience, recorded audience, I would say, I just want to be cautious about that because there's a case against a town that did fund a
Right.
church, the exterior for historic preservation purposes, and so learning from that case, we would probably steer away from that, given the issues around that particular case. So I want to just mention that. In terms of, like you said, about, there's some interesting stuff inside the Artemis Ward House.
I know,
Like,
but the point
stuff-
of it is that
yeah.
a person of historic interest lived there. That is the point,
Yeah.
rather than that just that he left his knickknacks. So, yeah,
Love it.
his hat, his,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think that's why this eligibility process is so important, because we do have to, if you look at the coalition website and you look at some of the projects that have been done, and you look at them and you say, wait a minute, how did they do that? How did they get away with that? So I don't know how they justified it. Somehow they must have, but I think it's important that we do look at eligibility and make sure that we don't end up in a case like that community is in right now. So,
So I think I think that the community preservation, the historic preservation plan is probably a key next step anyway.
I
right,
think
for
so,
either
too.
one of those programs, both the land,
right.
the
would
grant
re-
process, and also if we wanted to go down the line to the program you're suggesting.
Yep.
But just generally, like what, from a historic commission perspective, wouldn't you want to
Absolutely.
have a preservation plan as well? So is that, I believe CPA can fund preservation plans if necessary?
Well, there have been some meetings already, joint meetings, working on that, but I'm sure we'll have to work with the town and once we get it to that point and see where we go. But it's in the works, kind of.
Now, are you speaking from the point of view of the Historic Commission?
Commission, the Historical Society, the District Commission, we've met to kind of brainstorm and put some things in place based on the state preservation plan. But I don't believe we've had much conversation with the town yet. I haven't, at least our commission hasn't. Maybe the District Commission or the society has, but we're trying to do it jointly because we all have an interest in the same purpose.
I guess, I'm not sure I'd ask this question, but are there any properties in town that we are, other than, say, the Artemis Ward House, that we are aware of that have historic significance and potentially could get on the list?
Well, we have our inventory that we're completed.
Yeah,
And we're going through that and categorizing them now as far as
That,
importance and, you know, kind of putting a grading system to them.
that there is some
But-
historic significance.
Oh, absolutely, yes, not just age.
Yeah. I'm saying, if I remember.
Well, this is just from
previous-
1900, prior to 1900. We haven't gone beyond 1900.
So
So the
you'll s-
ones from prior to 1900, we based it on age, occupancy, architecture.
Yeah. That was
An
the one
event
thing
that
I heard
happened in
was we wanted to preserve certain kinds of architecture,
Right.
something like that. Okay.
There's not much architecture in Shrewsbury. It's actually no Victorian home in Shrewsbury. Can you believe that? It's like,
Really?
no. Which is unusual. Yeah, so there must have been at one point. It just hasn't survived. It was interesting that, you know, a lot of federals and. So anyway, that's it. I don't want to take up too much time on this, but it'll be an ongoing process, I'm sure that.
For the certified local government, did you get a sense that that was like an avenue that wanted to be pursued, or
Well,
is it?
I think there's some good things about it, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's it's kind of a nice program that if we could take advantage of it, but I don't know that, that we're ready. You know, we have to fulfill those requirements first.
Yeah, and I guess
but-
that,
Maybe we can get around some of them?
well, I mean, if
don't
we
know.
started looking to pursue some of those,
Yes.
you know, if our office started kind of down that path, is there an interest, or would we wind
There is,
up?
because I mean, like, I think that would help tremendously for, I mean, there's structural assessments and feasibility studies it covers. I mean, you know, we fund those, so if there's extra grant money that can be available for that type of stuff, that's a lot of what historical preservation is. You know, first you have to assess it, so, I mean, I think it's worth pursuing. I don't, when you get your assistant, maybe you can.
Yeah, I mean, well,
But
it's one of those things that, you know, I think, you know, certainly I have an interest in exploring, you know, how far we can get towards that designation. What I would need is, you know, someone to crack the whip really to keep us on track.
Yeah.
You know,
Well-
I do understand that, you know, capacity, we'll need to work on that, but I think we can make that inroads, you know, with, you know, if there's organizations, you
Well,
know,
I think we need to
that are willing to,
have some conversation about a plan
right.
going forward. I mean, it's just about every department in town has a plan, but historic preservation doesn't. So I think it's probably, we need to elevate that on the list.
Yep, yeah, and
This
it's,
could be part of that plan,
exactly, yeah.
okay?
And I just would want to make sure if we started down that road, it's not already a
Yeah,
dead end.
yeah,
that I'm
yeah,
gonna- I don't want to,
No, not too much would be a dead end when it comes to historic preservation.
enough. Excellent,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you, Gail, for that. If there's nothing else about the Historic Home Restoration Program, the next item on the agenda is project eligibility requests. We have handed to a member at town meeting. There were 3 eligibility determination forms that were completed, but in speaking with Chris, you said that each does have a co-sponsor of the town, and it was your understanding that the town is not ready to submit those for eligibility determination as of yet?
So what I'll kind of touch base on the town process. So this time around, what the town is trying to do through the town manager's office is really kind of collect all of the town department requests, separate from you know, any interested resident, but really as departments look at projects that they want to submit to CPC for funding and for their recommendation. We wanted to take a look at those and kind of vet them before being formally presented. Part of that is kind of twofold. So the idea being we don't want departments kind of competing for funds or, you know, projects. There may be a way to better align them and kind of align different departments. So making sure that we're not being kind of siloed in our pursuit of the funding and make sure that we're doing more holistic and comprehensive requests. That's, you know, certainly part of it. And so, what we've done is we've set up an internal timeline, so departments and department heads will be submitting their, kind of eligibility and application forms for December 22nd. Those will be reviewed at a staff level, and then shortly thereafter, we will have, you know, the kind of department requests to go to the committee, and we found that, you know, December, so looking at the January meeting most likely, or February meeting, having those to you for your review, and that gives us time to review them, before the May town meeting. So that's,
That doesn't give a lot of time for the committee to, and this is a committee where folks will go out and walk the perimeter of a piece of property or go look at the condition of the basketball courts at Dean Park. You know, when we had a deadline, it was November to get things started. My personal preference is that folks do the eligibility first, because I do know in looking over quickly the ones that were completed and handed out that you said would like to be revised, there were a few items on a couple of those that I don't believe are eligible. But if the department were to go ahead and put the time and work into completing a whole project around a piece that's not eligible, I think it would be better to edit it before it comes ahead. So I would love to see eligibility. That's why we said it was a two-step process. Because we'd like to make sure people are asking for something that we could say yes to if it fits. But we can, I mean, certainly we can say what's out there. We have, so those were the only 3 actual forms that we have received, which Kevin Esposito wants to edit. The other projects folks have talked about, and if anybody who attended our workshop watches this meeting later or is listening, I hope that they had some great ideas, and I hope that they will get those eligibility forms in and start talking about the projects. But the rest are simply email conversations that they haven't yet submitted any forms. And I appreciate you putting those email conversations in for us to be able to look at and keep an eye out for. There are projects around the possibility of a volleyball court, rehabilitation projects at Shrewsbury High School Stadium, Shrewsbury High basketball, I think that's supposed to be basketball, and tennis courts, baseball and softball as well. The library has expressed an interest in a story walk. There's maybe something for cemetery restoration, and the Historical Society is looking at moving forward after one of the assessments that they had completed in the first round. But as of this moment, we don't have anything that we can deliberate or render an opinion on, because we don't have forms for most of them, and the forms that we have, we're told they're not ready yet.
well, so, and I just, to be clear, I don't know if Kevin Esposito wanted to edit them, but I do know that we're trying to do that kind of internal process with the kind of the department requests. And part of that too is to make sure that, you know, that we're putting forth projects that are reasonably eligible, and make sure that they're really well vetted, so that the projects that departments are submitting are really strong candidates for approval. And we're just trying to make sure that they're really thought out and really reviewed before they come to the committee, so that, again, so that they're more cohesive, but also to make sure that we're refining them in ways that, you know.
If our first round was any indication, we did spend a lot of time deliberating, asking the applicants questions. So I guess, how do we officially say, please tell them to hurry up?
I think that's duly noted. I will, and as the process goes, I'm happy to provide that preliminarily to the committee, so that you can see, like with those emails of some of the discussions, some of the projects that have been brought to our attention. I will take that note for sure for next round, and we'll back that deadline up even further, to make sure there's plenty of time.
Before we went to rolling, our eligibility
September,
requests were due in November, and final applications were due,
earlier.
were they early?
Yeah.
How do I forget a year ago?
It was
I think
even
it was
earlier,
September, October,
Yeah.
and we had the final applications before the end of the year, which then we started the calendar year off with meetings with the applicants and asking, and they did some fantastic presentations, and I think the committee asked a lot of good questions. So we want to be able to properly vet each of these projects.
Yep.
So, yeah, we need more information and need it soon.
Yeah, and I think part of this process and this timeline that we put out was, the idea was kind of aligning it with the department budget cycle. But definitely hear the concerns and the need for more time, and we'll do that moving forward. And I will make sure that we streamline this process after the December 22nd, so getting them to you. We'll shoot for the January meeting.
Does anyone else have, John?
Oh, she's,
Yeah, so there's the 3 eligibility applications that you had sent us, we're not discussing tonight? That those
Well,
are the ones that need to be?
You said that they were going to be, we can discuss them, but did
Yeah,
they
it's-
intend,
I think
did
it's-
the department intend to have them submitted if Kevin Esposito is possibly going to change them?
I haven't had that conversation with him if it was meant to be submitted. Again, just with that internal process, I'm hesitant to say that, because that was kind of discussed in the last couple of months, setting that process up for us to do that as a, for staff departments. And so I just want to make sure that we're running through that appropriately from that end, so.
Good. Is the applicant aware? Not, the main applicant, is the main applicant aware that these eligibility requests, they were handed to me, are being pulled back to go through the internal process?
I haven't reached out to him about it, but
Okay.
I can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be good,
Yeah.
just to.
I
just to
had
close
reached
that
out to him, but
loop. Okay,
we haven't met as promised yet.
okay, all right. I think, I can certainly respect that there's an internal process to kind of go through to make sure that it's like not tripping over each other, and that's fine. I think we just, my opinion, I think we should consider that as pending submission as an advance look at it, and no action taken on it. But I would like to comment on it, because if you notice something and I notice something, for sure, I think we should say it, for sure.
And John?
before, if we're gonna comment, that's fine. I guess the one question I have is, go back to the workshop we had. The people that were here, we have not heard anything from them, like you didn't even get any emails or any phone calls from any of these people? Because the one I was just personally kind of interested in was the one off of, I guess they were talking about putting some trails off of Green Street down near the water wheel and the waterfall. I mean, it sounded interesting, but we haven't heard anything, I guess. We've gotten no feedback from any of those people.
The emails that I got, I added in, so that was the story walk and the historic cemeteries work, that phase 2. What I can do is I'll reach out, or have staff reach out again to the attendees to that workshop. I think we had a sign-in sheet for that, so we can reach out to them again and
Okay.
just mention that. And that internal process, I know that the committee wants to see these early on, but that's, for residents or for, we certainly don't have, it is a rolling deadline, so we don't have to stick to, December 22nd, that's just for the departmental tied ones, so, although we recommend a co-sponsor with a department,
Yeah.
it can be flexible.
All right.
Okay, so Chris, you are gonna you're gonna reach out to
I will do that.
the original, the people that attended, because one of them, we did get, there's an email trail, the volleyball court
The
request.
volleyball court, yeah.
So that Anand Sharma had initiated a conversation about that. He was also at the
Yes, he was
at the
there.
workshop. But I think some of these folks like Anand, Mr. Sharma, that need direction on where to go next. They have an idea, but they don't know what next to do. So, and I think it's probably the same case with several of the people that came to that workshop. So,
I mean,
How
the,
should-
the next step is to, if they need a co-sponsor from the town, secure that, have a conversation with the appropriate department head, and complete the eligibility review request. So, and I think we've been clear, and we can keep reminding them that. Because the email trail is awesome, and it's great to see the thought that's going into it and the questions that are being asked. But the email trail, other than reading it and giving feedback and saying, keep going to step 1, step 2, there's nothing that we can deliberate on or take action on from an email trail.
So I think this is where when we have the assistant town planner, it makes an opportunity that those offline conversations can be had between the applicant and town staff to really kind of walk through what is eligible for CPA generally that doesn't preclude our review of it, and be able to guide on like where to go next. So like Mr. Sharma had some conversation with a coach and had some thoughts put on in an email, and I mean, I can look at that and say, I looked at that and said, I think there's some things that are problematic with the request, but maybe that portion is excluded from that, and there's other things that could be eligible. But that's a workshop kind of conversation
Right.
with the applicant to then finally get a formal submission that then the full
I-
body of CPC can
I
review.
think that conversation should be had over getting the paperwork done. You know what I mean? Take this conversation, and so it looks like the conversation ended with Kevin Esposito did get back to Anand. Have you heard anything more from this? And it's a nice conversation, but it kind of ends with answering the questions, please elaborate. So what does he need next? How can we help him?
I believe that it's something in the realm of planning staff, to
Which was
to
the
reach out
answer
and
to, at the
keep going, yeah.
workshop, that was the answer to almost every question. Reach out to planning, reach
Yes.
out to planning.
But then it would be, okay, let's work through this. This is the form. Let's get some ideas on paper. Let's coordinate with town staff and, with the co-applicant and see if they have, interest in moving forward.
And when they do that, then this committee
Yes.
at a meeting will have something that we can deliberate on.
Yes. So can we talk process?
Fill out the forms. Get a co-sponsor, fill out the forms.
How does an applicant get to that stage?
Well, the applicant you're referring to knows because he left with a copy of it, of the plan, and was at the workshop. And as we've said before, that the website does outline the process. Any member of the committee would be happy to outline the process at any time asked. Planning at, what's the email address again?
Planning at shrewsburyma.gov. But yeah, I'm happy to reach back out to Anand and Kevin. There may have been follow-up to this that I'm not aware of, and I can circle back and just get my office back in the loop and see if we can help facilitate this a little bit further. So
Thank you. And I think further to that, I think once the assistant town planner is onboarded and familiarized with CPA, one of the things that person could also advise is that the conversation in the email was going down the path of artificial turf. And artificial turf is not eligible from CPA to be eligible for CPA funding per the 2012 amendment. So if they were talking about, beach sand, well, that's a different story, right? So it really is helping the applicant through the process to really understand what is eligible. I had a conversation with Mr. Sharma, and he was originally thinking it was going to be an indoor structure. I said, flat out, indoor structures, CPA does not allow indoor structures. So that was a non-starter there.
Nor would we have the budget for that.
But it's just not allowed, right? So that's where like your CPA 101 can be with planning staff to really review that. Then things that kind of, okay, pass that muster or gray area can come to the full CPC for like, hey, what do you all think? Right, so I think that there's some value to talk about what's there right now. So I think the volleyball court has some troubles right there, but I think that's something that could be discussed with planning to the applicant. So that they feel like there's an active participant here.
We can answer questions, we can refer people to the resources where they are for completing the forms as well as finding the answers. We can help dig into what the gray area is and help find answers. But ultimately, we can't complete the project forms, and we will encourage, we'll cheerlead, we'll fact find, but we still need the applicants to complete the process. If you'd want to run through these and perhaps it would help, I mean, there certainly in the 3 from Shrewsbury High, there were things that I saw that I have a little bit of perspective having chaired the fundraising campaign for one athletic facility at the high school. There are some opportunities for, I would think, certainly when there's opportunities for fundraising, it doesn't mean it happens that you can ask and people still say no, but there's certainly opportunities for fundraising around these. And there were also a few items which I thought were not eligible. For example, one was a storage container. I don't know how a storage container is eligible.
So there is a write-up on the Community Preservation Coalition's website about stadiums and outdoor recreation facilities. And so, if you think it's a good read, when I read that, it looked to me that the coalition is interpreting that storage for equipment is more allowable. It's more allowable, right? Than say the press box.
So I think before we go too much further, probably reading that article, if you could share with the committee, we would all be better informed in considering this in whatever iteration it ends up in, if we all read that first. If you haven't had a chance to read one of the stadium rehabilitation one has 3 components: replacing the press box, replacing lighting on the field, and constructing a new storage facility. The second project also there, and anyone following at home, these are not set in stone yet, but the next is baseball and softball fields restoration. It says to upgrade the dugouts and fencing on both of the fields and to renovate a lower field. It does, at this point, does not talk about surface types. And then the other is basketball and tennis court renovations as well. Those were the ones from the high school. Story Walk has been mentioned in the past, and it was talking about.
Sorry, interrupt.
Yes.
Okay, question? All right, about those 3. So I think the other things that kind of generally were in my mind were, I know that generally when we talk about recreation, it's recreation on public lands, on dedicated recreational land. So that's where I want to just fact find what's the gray area on that? Because that was an area that we got
It's true.
in trouble with, I would say, when the ISW had proposed a project on their land, and the first thing after we kind of got a little further around with the coalition, it said, oh, well, that's not dedicated recreation land because there's a building on there. Well, in this scenario, we're talking about the high school fields. Is that enough of a dedicated recreation space? I personally,
might
as
be
an
a
individual,
question.
seem like, it seems
Might be a
reasonable, but is there
question for
any
the coalition.
technicality to trip off? This is where the coalition.
There's a
conversation comes
20-year
in.
precedent, because for 20 years that has been dedicated
Yeah.
to those purposes. But whether or not precedent counts as dedication, I don't know.
Right, so that's a general question I had. The other one was about, are the conditions across those three projects such to the point where it is a capital, like you have to rehabilitate, or are these simply maintenance? Does it feel more like a maintenance miss, and we're just kind of, demolishing it in order to replace it, because we're skipping on the maintenance? Or they really get to the point where it really is unusable, and the only thing to make it usable is to recreate it?
I did not have softball or baseball players, but in the 6 years that I had a student at Shrewsbury High School, there were not games played on lower. I didn't know lower softball and baseball fields exist, so I believe they've been unplayable for a time.
Okay, so those are just general
Yeah.
questions that I would ask, in my opinion.
I guess my input would be, you brought up tonight that I guess the staff was gonna get together, so there might be additional items beyond this. I mean, if you take the requirements money-wise
Right.
at face value, forget all the discussion as to whether or not they qualify, this basically drains the bank for these three.
So it's over what we have.
Well,
Can't even
the
drain
point
it.
being is, if the rest of the staff is gonna come back and have some items also, might I suggest that Kevin and the staff prioritize 1, 2, 3, 4, as opposed to coming to us with a dozen of them and say, okay, here's $4 million worth of stuff, you guys choose. Because if we start to choose, then they're gonna say, well, I'd rather, I don't want to start doing after the fact. I'd rather do A than B. If we chose B, they say, no, I'd rather you go to A. So I think you guys, the town staff, should be prioritizing their projects to
Exactly.
start with.
They would have information as well about what is a more pressing need. Is there something that still has 5 years of life left in it, whereas something that will be unusable in 6 months?
See, even with 5 years of life, I mean, when I first read these, and again, as, when I spent 15 minutes reading them, my inclination was, these are all town repairs and refurbishments. In what, the budget a couple years ago, we spent $150,000 on Dean Park to fix up all the fields. That's no different than what we're asking here. So fundamentally, I guess I would question, we're not upgrading anything, we're not preserving anything, we're just fixing them up because we haven't maintained them over time.
And that is part of the intent for our internal process, is to again, make sure that we're going about it cohesively across departments, to prioritize them in terms of, need, timeliness, and also like what's more appropriate as a capital request, what may have other grant funding opportunities to stretch the use of the local dollar, so those will all be included in our
And
review.
in terms of even the fields that they're talking about being recreation for all, I don't believe is the case. These fields are for the Shrewsbury High School. If they're not using them, then we can use them.
There is precedent at the high school of youth sports using
Only when the high
facilities at the
school
high
isn't
school.
using them, though.
Pardon me?
Only when the high school's not using them. If there's
But
a
there's-
conflict, the high school says, you gotta go somewhere else, we want the
That
field.
makes some sense. It's also, I know that the high school has been able to derive some
All
minimum
I'm saying
revenue from
is
it.
that a qualifier that basically, it's not like Dean Park, where the first person that asks to use the field gets it, basically.
That, or I could play devil's advocate, the baseball fields at Dune Park, the the league or team that's scheduled for practice on that field gets precedent over me walking up with my mitt wanting to play catch.
See, I'm not necessarily agreeing with that because they schedule their time by February, March, or April. If you went and scheduled, in my mind, if you wanted to go down there in January and say Saturday at noontime, I want to go play catch on July 4th, should you get the time?
I do know that the high school has used the new field, the new turf field, which would not, the turf would not have been CPC eligible, but they do schedule, Shrewsbury Youth Soccer plays a number of games. I know in the inaugural year, they were able to schedule
with you. They
games for
schedule-
every team to play there.
They schedule them, they're not using them though. They get first dibs on the field. They
think we're
they will
saying the
allow
same
somebody
thing,
else to
John.
use it if they're not using it.
Because I don't get first dibs. I can't schedule my catch in Dean Park until the league's games are scheduled.
And all I'm saying is they schedule them before you ask for it.
And they
If you ask for it first, I'm under the impression you would.
I don't
get-
think I get to play catch if Little League has games every Saturday at 10 a.m., no matter how early I asked.
May I begin? So I think it's an interesting philosophical conversation about it.
Yes.
I think that's something that we would debate during a prioritization of projects, multiple projects that are ahead of us, when that time comes. So then we can say, is this really a value add to the community and how is it being used? So I think at this time, these are ideas that need to go vetted, right, and as we already discussed.
It goes back to what I said when we started. There's not much we can do here right now. So we hope that there will be more information, more concrete shortly. And again, we are happy to help any of these applicants or applicants we haven't seen yet define what is eligible and what is not. I would suggest homework for all of us that we go read the part about stadium eligibility, because it sounds like there are some nuances to it that would all be better prepared to deliberate, having done that.
Having paid the coalition, I'll reach out for the dedicated open space and get some more feedback on
That would be terrific, thank you. I know we don't have it on the agenda, but this may be a good, an appropriate place. You had an update on each of the projects that we had previously moved forward. Could you, I know it was in the materials that you shared prior to me, but could you real briefly give us an update on where those all are?
Yeah, so I provided a memo, and I just want to give a brief shout out to Louise O'Neill, the assistant planner, who largely reached out and put that memo together. So looking at that, it just kind of details responses for most of the projects. As you'll see, most of them are still working through some of the preliminary work that they need prior to expending the actual CPC funds. So most of them have no funds expended as of yet, but they are making progress towards that. We do see a couple that have made some minor expenditures, some preliminary invoices, notably the townwide playground assessment, which has completed some invoices and completed a number of surveys. We also have the historic section of Mountain View Cemetery. They completed their project. So we'll be working with them on closeout and next steps, getting a kind of a finalized report to CPC and what the project completion is. So we'll be working on that with them shortly. And then the land acquisition that expended a majority of their funds as well. Although there is some open PO for survey work and some of the odds and ends of closing out that process. So there's still some minor work to be completed, but the bulk of that has been expended and completed. So that's the brief updates on those. I'm happy to kind of dig into any particular one a little bit more if we'd like, or I'm happy to discuss as needed.
Question. On these assessments that have been made, are we as a committee privy to the final document? Like the pergola, for instance, when that assessment was done, will we see those documents in totality so that we can evaluate? Because there'll probably be a next step for most of these projects, and is that public
Yeah,
information?
and that's something, for the public, for the, project closeout, what we'll do is we'll get kind of the final product that they've completed, and we'll have that, you know, for our review. If, you know, if we need additional things completed, we can look at, you know, if there's any remaining funds. But certainly happy to present those to the committee once the project's largely complete, and they can report on that. And that'll be part of the wrap-up to the contract documents as well, just making sure that everything's all tied up. Seems like the first one to be through that hoop will probably be the Mountain View Cemetery, so I'll reach out to them and work towards developing that process and
Thank you.
getting
We
it.
could put, I'm trying to find our contract from last year, it's been a while since I've looked at, but we could put that language in contracts going forward if it isn't there already, ask them to please share the
Final
findings of any assessment as a part of their report to us. I mean, it's common sense, but let's make sure it's written out as well. So, anyone have any questions for Chris on those? That,
I do.
yes,
Chris, I think, when if you go to the coalition's website and the data bank for the project database, it doesn't list any Shrewsbury projects. So I
The
don't know.
CB3 report?
Yeah, so I don't know if that's just not submitted yet, or there's an issue on their end and inputting that information.
So for part of that CP3 report, I did submit that to the committee, the actual submission form, so I'm inclined to say the issue is on their end, but
Okay.
I'll happy to look into that and see if something didn't submit or whatever, but I did provide that documentation. I can go back and make sure that they did.
Cool,
submit
thank
it,
you.
so.
and that segues well to number 7 on our agenda. We wanted to discuss signage. It would be terrific, you know, that says that land clearing has begun in the Camp Wanigan parking area. We had talked about getting we've seen some examples go around of both permanent signs, but right now even a temporary sign that, you know, looks like a political yard sign that could simply say, this project funded in part by the Shrewsbury Community Preservation Committee. Something simple, but that people could see it, and we could also suggest permanent. I mean, not every project bears permanent funding, but permanent signage. But certainly if it's a large project that maybe there's a donor wall, CPC should be listed there as well. Chris, you were going to look into how to get some signs. I know, Melanie, you've had some thoughts on one as well as you, Gail.
I like the wordage on the Salem sign that Chris shared with us, because it's something that it's general and it can be moved from location to location, you know, just reinstalled, and it's visible, it's shows well from the street. I don't know how many projects we would have going at once that we would need, you know, tons of them, but I just like that nice, bright, visible signage. Campaign signs might be a little too, you know, passerby. You just kind of ignore them after a while
different
because you
sizes.
see so many of those signs. It's like, oh, yeah, and you know, do you really read them all? But something a little that stands out a little more.
We did confirm that this is an allowable use of our administrative funding.
Yes,
just
I think we did. Yeah,
advertising.
I think we found other communities that were doing that, so.
Yes, so I feel like I could read what's from the coalition's page on that. It says, many CPA communities have adopted a policy of posting signs at CPA-funded project sites to let members of the public know how their CPA dollars are being spent. In some cases, the signs are funded as part of the project expense. In others, the CPC uses administrative funds.
If we had a sign that, you know, a temporary one that's moved around.
Yeah.
Or out, we bring it out every year of projects, especially when there's just shovels in the ground, it's not finished. And I think that is something that we should fund for our administrative expenses. If we were to ask someone to put permanent acknowledgement, that could be a project, whether it's, you know, the proverbial brass plaque or something else. That, I mean, depending on the project, it might be an appropriate use of project funds.
Yeah,
Do you want to give us some concrete examples that we could, I mean, there's a million out there. If people like something, could submit it to Chris, but that at our next meeting, we could choose something and get it ordered. And at this point, hopefully there'll be snow soon. I'm not sure the prudence of putting them in the ground when it may or may not snow.
Yeah.
But it would be great to show the community where their CPC dollars are working.
What I'll do, so I can work with our procurement officer to see if there's specific vendors that we need to use for something like that, or if, you know, whatever procurement process we need to go through to get some examples. I don't know if it even meets that threshold for if we're doing just kind of the, you know, the Vistaprint signs or whatever, if you will. But I'll look into that and try to get some preliminary designs for those general kind of yard signage for the next meeting. Yeah, and just in terms of the proverbial brass plaque, we did write that into the contract documents that they need to provide some kind of a signage or attribution for the committee to review, or, you know, where feasible. So it's somewhat in our process, and that'll be part of that closeout to review if there's a way to kind of memorialize the use of the CPC funds.
So are you talking about things like, now I had proposed something for the park and, Lake Street Park area, you know, the Howard Sears property. I was under the impression that there was some interest in that from, you know, the seller and so on, that he'd like to see something. Maybe I'm imagining this, but you know, maybe I heard it from Mo, that he would like a sign saying that this was his family farm or something. That was the drift of that little draft I made about how the Howe Sears Farm, founded whatever year it was, brought to you by funds from the two sources.
And that would be a permanent signage.
Yeah.
And perhaps, do we need a policy as a committee on permanent signage versus temporary signage? The ones that we pull out of the closet and put out when something's in progress, and then a standard and consistent something that might be installed with something permanent. But with the installation of a permanent sign, how does
No.
it get maintained?
The other side of this is that the rest of Lake Street Park was part of that same farm, that's to my understanding. And, you know, that nobody ever put anything up there. It's Lake Street Park. So I don't know if at this point, you know, we're doing this specially for that one little segment, or if it applies to the whole former farm property. But, you know, we should at least talk about it, I think. I think it has a historic import that is worth recognizing. So I don't know what pot that would come out of.
Right.
Sounds like a potential scout project.
Sounds like a wonderful scout project. Maybe working with Parks and Rec to look at consistent signage and attribution at every one of our parks in town. I mean, I believe, doesn't Dean Park say gift of, I can't recall the name of the family that was originally property, that it was originally a farm.
I think it was the Deans.
That's what I thought. I couldn't remember the first name. I know. But yeah, I mean, it would be a great thing, and I think it'd be a terrific scout project to look at how they make sure all of our parkland is attributed appropriately to where it came from. I mean, most of it is a gift in some way. So next meeting, you'll have some things for us to look at, and perhaps we can make some choices and move that forward. Yes.
Would it make any sense, I just had a thought, as to what type of sign we use for different projects? Maybe, just looking in the future, if there was a project that was gonna take a long, extended time to complete, maybe that would require a more permanent temporary sign, as opposed to, a quick project that's gonna, take place. It's, doing a driveway or walkway or whatever happens, you could put up the temporary, more campaign-type sign. So we wouldn't have to invest as much money into major production signs. So maybe the project would dictate the type of sign, is what I'm saying. Just a thought.
If there's a common design, it could be, if it's a huge, extensive project with construction fencing around it,
Yeah.
print that same thing on a banner. Banner hangs there.
Yep.
If it's little, so I guess find us a design and give us options.
So, yeah, I'm just throwing that out. Just a thought.
That's a good thought.
There's lots of different signs out there, so we could.
Like to have enough to put signs out for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and along the same vein of showing the community what CPC funds are doing and giving information, the next on the agenda is potential website updates, project pages, and other community examples.
So I think we had touched on that the last meeting. I apologize, that was supposed to come off. I think that's where I meant to put the project updates
Okay.
instead. Not the website updates, so I apologize for that.
All right, so we're good with the website right now?
Yeah, we will add project pages from that discussion. I have not yet, but as the projects move along and have a little bit more kind of meat to them, we'll be able to put up a little bit more information on them.
All right. So next steps, we have a few things we've put towards next month. Yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I think Melanie had done a little research as well on other websites, and I did some as well. And I found one that you might want to look at if we want to updo our website. I went back to the beginning of CPA. So in 2001, when cities or towns were funding projects, I figured, okay, they've been doing this the longest amount of time, so how have they developed their websites? And I just took 2001 communities, and there were 36 of them. They haven't come a long way. There was only a handful that had any kind of information on there. Most of them were just Community Preservation Committee, who they were, when their terms ended, and that was in their application forms, and that was it. There were some of them, North Andover and Newton had maps, and they were interactive, or they had a map, and then on the map they showed where the projects had been done, which was kind of interesting to see how it was spread out over the community. If it was bundled in little areas, or it was the projects were all over. So the map idea I thought was kind of nice. Most of them just put the basic stuff, but my favorites were Amherst and Chelmsford. And Amherst, I liked theirs because they had a thorough listing of all the projects that they have done by year. So you could go to whatever year they funded and look at their projects. They didn't have pictures, but they had the detailed proposals and the funding, and so it was really interesting to see and for the community, it would be great if they wanted to go back and see what was done, 5-10 years ago, they could go back and see it. But Chelmsford had updates and they had pictures, so it was like if they were working on a project, they had little thumbnail pictures like of the project in progress, so you could see the whole thing. It was very transparent. There was anybody in the community that couldn't go to that website and easily find it. Some of it you had to search through. You couldn't even find the link to the application, so it was like, yeah, I think ours is not bad considering what I saw. So I would suggest that you look at Amherst and Chelmsford for some, and then the map,
North Andover.
many of them might have it. I'll work on 2002 and 2003 and keep going, just see if there's something out there that's really cool.
Yep.
But that was my two favorites. Bless you.
And the coalition does have examples on their website. It might be appropriate on ours, even once we figure out what to put about our projects, but to have a line to see what's happening in other communities. Check out the Community Preservation Coalition and just simply put the link.
It was really easy to find this because on the coalition website, you can do, they have a link by date or by project or whatever. So I just went to the towns listed by adoption date, and then it just gave me the whole list. And then when you punch on that town, it takes you right to the website. I mean, it was very simple to do. It wasn't like I was punching in every town and looking on the map, so it was kind of fun.
You know, for a while.
When you have nothing else to do, you just play on the computer.
Yes, I went to the website, got all the, went through the list of towns that had CPC, just made a handwritten list of about 15 or 20 of them that are reasonably close to us, and ruled out anything that just got CPC because they wouldn't have any projects, and looked at theirs. And I think I found Concord was pretty good. Concord has a lot of stuff in it. It's just packed with history. And I left the house without my notes. I can't believe I did that. And do you recall what was the other one I told you
No,
about?
I don't.
It was
I know
another
I had
town.
mentioned Acton to you, but then when I went to Acton, I was thinking of something else.
Okay, so it was
wasn't-
another one. Yeah, a lot of places didn't bother with much in the way of visuals at all. It was really too bad.
Right.
But there was one that had a little slideshow right up there on the front page of their webpage, and it was just clicking over pictures, and interesting. Not a lot of. I don't know if that's the best way to go, because when you flash pictures in front of somebody, it doesn't really tell you anything. But there were a couple that if you got into it, and sometimes it was buried in their plan. You had to go to their plan for that year, and you looked at it, and it had the pictures and the verbiage for each project. I think that's asking a lot of people to click through several screens, and nobody's going to look at the plan, really. You have to be real hardcore to go and do that. But yeah, if we had something that was a little more right at the surface and had a couple pictures and maybe a little verbiage, I think, especially pictures over time. This is the site before anything happened, and then the first steps, and then next, and just go on with the whole thing. And maybe a little bit of information about how much it cost or whatever.
Whatever it is, I think it needs to be easily accessible. You don't
Yeah.
want to have, if somebody's going to go to our site, they don't want to have to be digging around, like you said, to find what
Yeah.
they want.
Right.
It has to be there and easily accessible
Yeah,
to
yeah, if
them.
the picture catches your eye,
Yeah.
you're hooked.
It's good to think about this now, where we have a small number of projects that we have
yeah.
done, to think about what we want it to look like in 10 years from now, when there's
Yes,
10 times that many
yes,
projects,
and
we
people
hope.
will look at.
But to figure out now, my husband's a database person. You gotta think about what you wanna take out before you start dumping stuff in. So this is a good way to frame it. John?
Well, I guess that's something we probably want to discuss more at, say, a next meeting when everybody's here.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, right now, anything we have goes through planning, and they have a million things going.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily number one on their list.
What?
I don't know.
Wait a minute.
Wait.
Does he have to come back? Ouch.
We're a relatively
Who
new
appointed
committee.
you?
Be honest. I mean, the planning board's number one. Can't get around that. Anyway, maybe we should discuss next meeting, would it be reasonable? I mean, between having a chair and a vice chair and a clerk, do we have a webpage coordinator that's on the committee? To give someone that responsibility, gather all the data, and help get it organized so poof, somebody can put it on.
Certainly someone could organize it, but I don't believe that the town, no municipality in their right mind will give a volunteer access to the website to make
I didn't say
changes.
that.
But if someone could coordinate the information, I think right now we're
Yes, I
still
didn't say
gathering
I would have the
information.
ability to go in there, but if he has to sit there and decide how he's gonna gather all the data and everything, as opposed to like, here it is, put it on the site.
Well, check
that-
this
that's
out.
kinda
One,
my
I
impression.
think these two are on their way coming up with that.
Do the legwork.
You're finding great examples, but what we would need from planning is what format, because I suspect that our municipal website is, there's a formula to each page, and there's a certain number of layers from each page. If someone, not immediately, but if someone could share what that framework looks like, then we could channel the ideas into that, because we might see something really cool, but our website doesn't work like that. We've got to make sure that it'll be easier to come up with ideas if we know what that platform looks like.
Okay.
If that could be shared, just so we don't waste time coming up with great ideas we
No,
can
but-
never do.
The platform, whoever's gonna do the data entry has to know the platform. In my mind, we would say, here are the projects we got, project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here are the projects we had last year. And then maybe we, or the person that's the interface tries to set up, you know, we talk about you have to click 19 times to get somewhere. In that, anytime I go to a website, that's my big complaint. If they ask you for feedback, my favorite word is intuitive. Your site is not intuitive, meaning I gotta chase everything till I, you know, get to something. And yeah, you can't put everything on the front page, but it's a matter of getting it organized. So in that sense, all I'm saying is we can give him some help.
Right.
Yeah.
And but we could be more effective in our help if we know what he needs that information to look like. We don't want to give you
Yeah, but I
60
don't-
pictures if you can have
True.
3. And just to think about what information to collect. That way, I think we'd all be more, it'd be a better use of everyone's time. So I think you're absolutely right, John. I just want to give us the outline first, and then we'll
Yeah,
collect
I'm
that
not sure I understand the outline. You mean how to format it?
Not for inputting, but the fact that if for each project there exists the ability to have a headline, 3 lines of verbiage, and 4 pictures.
Right.
Like that sort of detail, because that way no one's wasting time coming up with something so huge and grandiose that it ends up with, just as you said, we want to avoid click, click, click. You want it to be intuitive, but we have to find out what our platform allows. We might not allow us to be intuitive. Hopefully it will. That's all I'm just saying, is that we do exactly what you're saying, but with some instructions from the people that know more first.
Yeah, and I think what I can give is the framework, so we're kind of doing more on the planning board side of things, trying to give access to and zoning board as well, trying to give access to those project materials and creating project pages. We've actually just started doing a process for larger projects of actually having project pages after approval, so actually during the construction, you know, publishing some of those kind of documents of, you know, what's actually going on, construction schedules, so trying to like really increase the, you know, transparency of that entire process that goes on at a staff level. So I can kind of outline some of that framework that we currently have, and we can see maybe we want to follow that same framework. If there's ways that we can improve it, I'm going to copy it for those boards too, so I want to know that too, but yeah, certainly.
Terrific,
Yeah.
thank you.
And, you know, we've got these 2 ladies already looking at Concord and Acton, or wherever. They're already chasing down some websites that look better than others. You know, maybe we either call them or talk to somebody about why, you know, if there's a website we like, talk to somebody about how are they doing it that makes it so nice? What are they doing? I'm sure they would love to.
Well, yeah, people like to talk,
Yeah.
and why reinvent the wheel, you know? You can see
Especially
something
if
good.
it's, if
Always
you're
copy
telling
from the
them,
best.
I really like your website, can you tell me how you did it? They're gonna go like, oh, okay.
By the way, I think that we mentioned once before that we should have on our page a link to the coalition. Do you recall that? Or am I imagining
A
it?
lot of them have a link to the.
Yeah, I was
think
thinking
we
that a
do,
lot of
don't
them,
they?
and I think that's
can't
extremely
remember
valuable to
doing
have that.
I thought we did.
If not, that's certainly, we can do that. That'd be a good, we have a sidebar that has like
I-
links to other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that'd be a really good one to put on the sidebar.
All right, next steps. Chris, you said that there was an intent to have our December meeting be a
Yes.
joint meeting with the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yeah, so at the last Affordable Housing Trust meeting, they've just wrapped up and approved their action plan. And so part of that is they wanted to have, suggest a joint meeting with the CPC for their December 4th. So they would come and attend, just to have a conversation about that action plan, and kind of what they want to do. So they're looking most likely for a request for funding from the CPC. I know in the budget in that action plan, I think it says 35%. That's still a topic of conversation amongst them, so likely to come in a little bit lower. We understand that that's a lot of the CPC's funding, but certainly wanted to come and have that conversation with the trust to see if there's an opportunity to kind of dial in what is palatable, what, is there a way to do some contribution towards the trust fund. So, and then kind of talk about the projects that they're anticipating from that action plan. It details a number of things, including, the housing production plan, but also looking at, opportunities for developing units of affordable housing. They looking at that SHI quota that we have for development of housing for the safe harbor provisions. So, kind of talking about those kinds of projects that they would be anticipating, as well as a potential request, and trying to formulate that a little bit more so that they have an understanding of expectations of the committee and vice versa. So.
Can I just ask, has anything come up about the towns adjacent to train stations?
MBTA zoning?
Yeah,
Yeah, so November 15th, my next plug, so November 15th at 6. Oh, hold on, let me get the time right.
Oh, yeah.
6:30,
They have
I
a
think it
meeting
was.
here,
I think it was 6:30, let me get the time right, hold on. In the senior center. And it is a 6:30 start time, correct, yeah. So 6:30 in the senior center on November 15th is our initial MBTA outreach meeting. So we'll be presenting on kind of the status of the MBTA. It's very similar, the presentation, to what I presented to the select board at their last meeting and the planning board at their meeting as well, for the MBTA zoning. I've added a little bit more into it in terms of, for, the public that may not be as ingrained in that process and may not have followed it from the beginning. So just trying to kind of go over what is MBTA zoning, what should we be looking at for MBTA zoning, and how do we want to develop that compliant zoning. So we'll do a presentation. I have two we'll then go into breakout sessions. We have some planning activities that we'll do, trying to be a little bit more interactive and work through answering those questions in a more interactive way. We kind of piloted those with staff actually just this afternoon, and it went pretty well. We got a really great conversation out of working on those activities, so I don't want to give too much away. But we'll run through those and then kind of come back for a conversation as a group, really trying to be more informal, really connect with the community on what their aspirations for making this compliance are. And I think those activities will help us to kind of facilitate that conversation and then come back and talk more deeply about it as well. So I'm excited about it. I think, I think it's going to be a great way of kind of answering some of the bigger questions and guiding that preliminary process. And then we'll be refining the regulations from there, developing that with that lessons learned from the outreach, and looking towards developing those regulations. We'll do plenty more outreach throughout that process up until May. So likely everyone's going to be sick of me by the time I get up there for the zoning presentation at Maytown meeting. But
You have other, other dates public at this point?
no, just the November 15th is the one that we have public. We will be doing some,
Coming up soon.
we do have a number of planned,
Next Wednesday.
like online engagement opportunities. Trying to do a little bit more kind of strategic stakeholder engagement. So we'll be reaching out with those, but then we'll have additional, probably around January, that we'll be looking at additional public outreach when we have some more refined regulations and a little bit more of the detail for people to dig into and say that, this language has to be
Is
changed.
that something the project kind of has to be completed by the town meeting?
So, in order to be compliant, we need to have zoning in place for December of 2024. So
we could do a special. town
yeah,
meeting.
so the intent is to target May. Part of it is it's kind of a little bit chicken and the egg. We can do a lot and have a reasonable amount of certainty that this will be compliant, but ultimately, we have to pass the zoning in May, and then we get a review from the state, and then they say that it is compliant or not. So we are reserving that fall town meeting in case we need to make some adjustments. Hopefully that's not needed, but it gives us an ability to kind of,
What's not clear to me is, do we have to come up with 50 new acres of land? Or can we take, like, is it the one that's behind the credit union, Imperial Arms or whatever it is? Can we designate something that's already built and say that is cluster housing?
yeah, so, I mean, just to be clear, it's not necessarily 50 acres. What it is, the compliance model is you have, those are minimums, so you have to have at least 50 acres designated, and at least 15 units per acre allowed by right. So, doing the math on that, it could be, you could do, say 50 acres at 30 units an acre, which is probably a density that we don't necessarily want to do, unless it fits a location. But, we can kind of play with those numbers. Ultimately, that capacity analysis and that compliance model that we have to meet identifies just shy of 1,500 new units. So however we zone that, it has to be approximately 1,500 new, not new units, so 1,500 units supported. To your point of the Imperial Village and kind of what we've been looking at is it assumes no units on the district. So if you zone in existing density, those units that are created already, you're essentially taking, the way I've been phrasing it, is taking credit for the multifamily housing that we've already developed. So you can place it on those. It assumes, no units, so that it could be that they're able to redevelop in a higher density. I don't know what Imperial Village is, what their density is offhand, but it's probably
Well,
pretty close.
I guess, in my mind, in this law, Shrewsbury kind of gets stiffed because we were one of the few towns that, go way back 40, 50 years, we allowed density type usage,
Mhm.
whereas a lot of other, why the law was written, because a lot of towns did not allow it, and now they're saying, take Southborough, you really gotta have some density. When we've already got all the density housing, and now they're saying you need to get more. In effect, on the 1,500 units, if they're telling you you're gonna build another 1,500 units, then, we've already got, a couple thousand units of housing that's considered density housing, I guess.
Right, and again, it's not necessarily new units, so it is, you have to zone that allows, create a zone that allows for the capacity of 1,500 units. So if there's existing multifamily there, it doesn't take that into consideration. So as long as someone could come along and, say demolish those units or keep those units, whatever it is, as they can, on that designated zone, they can put 1,500 units, regardless of what's existing.
But because it's already existing, wouldn't automatically count against it.
It wouldn't count either or, so it's not counting towards. So that's why I'm trying to be kind of clear with it, where it's,
Yeah.
it doesn't take
If
the
we
existing.
designated that piece of property, Imperial, or even York Village up there, we want that property to be considered dense housing.
Mhm.
That's not acceptable. They'd have to
It
they'd have to
is.
knock it down and rebuild on it.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So
But-
in order to be
let's see.
compliant, yeah, you don't have, to be compliant, there's no requirement to
just
actually
need-
build the units.
We just have to make the acreage available.
You simply have to find the acreage at a density that meets that 1,500 units
Yeah.
could be developed by right, regardless of what is existing there.
I mean, realistically, if we went and did 1,500 new units, we'd be building another school. Simple as that.
All right, so things that CPC can impact and control. So you anticipate that some of the eligibility requests we won't be entertaining at our next, at least the ones that have to do with departmental requests, we won't have those for our next agenda. I'm asking because I want to be sure that we give enough time for the Affordable Housing Trust to present whatever they'd like to, and that we get to have time for a thoughtful conversation. But I also don't want a 3-hour meeting. So we may have some of these other projects come in. Hopefully, we will know that well in advance. And certainly, the sooner people can get things in, the sooner we can start to look at them and evaluate them informally, and then come informed to the meeting. What else? And we put the signage. Maybe we could keep that. Maybe I get a stopwatch and we keep that conversation shorter for the next meeting. So if we are going to have the Affordable Housing Trust here, I want to give them the appropriate amount of time, but I don't want to rush the regular business of this body. Is there anything else that you anticipate that would go on that agenda?
No, I think that's all I would anticipate, so.
And the date of our December meeting is?
December 4th.
December 4th. Okay. Do those members here feel like there's enough adequate time to invite them to be on our agenda as well as our regular business? Sounds like they're already invited.
don't know.
But I want to make sure we're hospitable.
Well, I mean, if we need another date to push them to, I think I can have that conversation, that our December 4th is, already has a heavy agenda, and we want to look at, some other date. I'd be happy to report that to them.
Yeah, I mean, logically, I'd say move them under the assumption that we do get proposals for next month. It might be more prudent to move them, say, to the January meeting. However, as we get proposals, the closer we get to next May, I think,
Right.
stuff starts to become more condensed, so I don't know if there's any convenient
Chris
time.
had mentioned December 22nd being the departmental deadline. So if,
For internal review, so
For
that
internal
those would,
reviews.
so I'll try to have those for our January meeting.
So, yeah.
I think we should keep the AHT December 4th, so that anticipation that we're not going to get project requests coming in December from
Yeah.
the departments. And,
Makes
we don't-
sense.
yeah, I think it's probably not going to materialize
Yeah, departmental review is the 22nd. Those won't be here. And I guess I would just ask any other interested parties to let us know. But I will say that on the next agenda, if it's, we're not going to discuss a project if it's an email thread or something that hasn't been properly vetted by their department. Yeah, we won't spend time on that. We'll spend our time learning more about the Affordable Housing Trust, figure out how we work together, and if we have something actionable, we will do it, but we'll do it in an efficient manner.
Okay, so my recollection is that last year, or early this year, I guess it was, that the select board liked to have things by February. Is that still, or am I hallucinating?
I think it was March that we had. In February, we spent a great deal of time making decisions. And
Okay,
we
so
had
March,
full
all right.
applications and it had
That's
time
better.
to ask questions. And we met with some of the applicants a couple of times.
Okay.
But we had, I believe it was February, that we had the applicants present to us.
Okay.
And at that time, we had already had time to review their applications. Well, back up, we had already determined they were eligible to submit an application and had time to review the application. So folks will just have to move quickly.
And,
Yes.
you know, not required, but something we wanted to do, and we did do for the first round, which was have a public notice, and so invite public to come in and speak to those projects. So, you know, I think it's gonna be certainly a time crunch to try to get public notification right in the paper, and so I think, you know, it is concerning in terms of the timeline crunch.
We could certainly set it as February. I mean, the thing about having gone to rolling, we kind of take the structure out of the process. We
Yeah.
roll with it. So we could set February as any project that have gone through the eligibility determination and submitted a full application by the February meeting is invited to that meeting, and we'll go with what we've got.
I think it's fair.
So you're suggesting a February public meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that separate from the regular February meeting?
I think we did it as part of our regular meeting last
Yeah.
time.
Same, yeah.
And maybe having advance notice of that will light a fire to get some of those done.
That isn't that far off at all, you know, when you
No.
think about it.
Not at all. Is there anything else, folks? Then is there a motion to adjourn?
I would have,
Oh,
Nope.
wait,
literally, one more question. Chris. You've interviewed 2 of the 3 candidates, you got one more to go. Timeline, when do you think you physically will have somebody in that seat? I mean, you've interviewed 2, I assume you're gonna interview the 3rd one this week. Would you be making an offer by, say, Friday, or would that be next week? Then they gotta give 2 to 4 weeks' notice. So you're probably, January 1st is safe to say you'll have somebody in the seat? You think you get them there before that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. You know, certainly after we find our kind of candidates and rank our candidates, it'll be submitting an offer and working on timeline. I anticipate that we'll be able to fill this position fairly quickly once an offer is accepted. But that's part of the negotiation phase, so I don't want to set a date without.
Yeah, but I mean, normally, do they just want to give 2 weeks' notice of where they are?
So they may not, some of the candidates may not need to, some of them may. So it really depends upon which candidate we choose, and
All right.
so.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Was opposed? And yeah, I'm not letting you abstain. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Abstain.
Thank